Welcome to this episode of Cleo's Adventures. Today's show is Cleo's Adventures as a Groupie, Part 2. If you missed Part 1, then you missed my story about how I became this infamous groupie when in fact I never really considered myself to be a groupie. It just sort of happened. And it turned out that I made an album called the Groupies, and I went on TV shows and radio shows as a groupie, and everybody knew me as Super Groupie Cleo, when in fact I never really believed I was a groupie. The Groupies, there's the album I did, the Groupie album, and it even has my name on the back. Cleo said this and Cleo said that. Yeah, we didn't sing. It was a documentary album talking about our lives as groupies. Meanwhile, I never considered myself to be a groupie. How did this happen? Well, in the last episode, I explained that as a young girl, at 15, I started running wild and going out every night, hanging out in clubs and bars, and of course we met all the English rock groups coming in from town, and I had a column. Somebody asked me to write a column in a newspaper, a Greenwich Village newspaper, called The Downtown. It was called Pop Sounds by Cleo, and I got to interview all these rock bands coming in from England. That was like when they first started coming in. Nobody knew them yet. Their first stop was New York, straight from London Airport to New York. And one day, there was this group playing called the Nice. And the organist, oh, he was just so beautiful. I fell in love. And his name was Keith Emerson, from a group called the Nice, which nobody ever heard of. You probably never heard of it. Later on, he became known for the group Emerson, Lake and Palmer. But at that time, it was just another English group from England called the Nice. But I fell in love. I was 17, and that semester, when school ended, I decided to go visit him in England. We'd been writing these love letters back and forth. I miss you, I love you, and he said, come visit me. Of course, I didn't tell my mother I was going to stay with a guy. I told her I was going to stay with a girlfriend, but I went to spend the summer with him. In the last episode, I showed you a whole bunch of pictures from the photo album I had of our love affair. Here is a picture of, he played at some big concert there. Who knows? Who can remember the name of it? Look at that mini skirt. Boy, were mini skirts short in those days. And fringes. We all loved fringes in those days. Here's a picture of us in New York. Saturday, February 10th, 1968. Oh my, that's almost 30 years ago. Eek! And here we are on the bed in his hotel room. And here's some photos of when I went to London. I was there July and August. Here's a picture of me coming out of the ladies' room. This is, I don't know what, but don't we look sweet? And here's me on a parking meter. And of course we did this thing. I mean, doesn't every teenage couple do this thing? And we went to Brighton. His parents lived near Brighton. I forgot the name of the place, but it was near Brighton. We went to visit his parents. After the summer, I had to go back to school. I thought it didn't last long because I was doing all this speed. But, you know, I wanted, it was enough of this cold water flat, and I wanted to go back to New York anyway. But for the sort of Christmas and New Year's vacation, I went back to England again, and that's when we got engaged. He bought me an engagement ring. Here's the little receipt from the engagement ring, though who knows what happened to that ring. It has long since vanished somewhere. Probably sold it for dope somewhere. Here's some more pictures. I don't know where, I guess in his apartment. For Christmas, we went to visit his parents. Here are his parents. And here's me with his parents, and somebody gave me this little dog. And there's me with my mini skirt. And here's his mom. And here we are sitting on the couch in his parents' home. Here are some more pictures inside his apartment. We were playing cards with these round cards, and he's pointing at a bottle of wine. Looks a little drunk. We were doing a lot of drinking. And here's the airport, and it's all written in black. The airport, the end. This was the last time we were together. Doesn't he look sad? Don't I look sad? It was a really sad time. And then I explained how our love affair ended and broke up. Oh, it was just terrible. And I was wrongfully accused of being a groupie. So in revenge, I set out to become the most famous groupie on the planet. If you're going to call me a groupie, well then I'm going to be the most famous groupie. So I did, and I made an album, this documentary album about the groupies, and TV shows, and all sorts of radio and magazine promotional things just to promote the album. Meanwhile, I was becoming famous all over US and England as being super groupie Cleo. Shall we listen to some of the Groupie album? Alan Lorber, who produced the album, was nice enough to send it to me on a cassette, because who has record players anymore?
I started going down to the village when I was about 14 or 15. I'd go there every single night, and I'd take drugs, every drug. If it was there, I took it. And we'd go to this place called Figaro's. Also after school in the afternoon, we'd go down there. And they played records, and that was the big thing. You'd go down there and dance. And music was the whole thing there, because you just went to hear the music.
Cafe Wild?
And they all had long, Figaro's. You just sit around, and everybody had long hair. And I started really getting hung up with people with long hair. And then I started getting bored of the village, and we heard about this discotheque called the Cheetah that just opened. So we went there, and we hustled our way in so we could be free, you know, get in for free every night. And every night, it was only 10 blocks from my house, and every night my friend and I would go there. And of course, the first thing we saw were the groups, because they were the only ones that had the long hair. And every 2 weeks they changed groups. And every 2 weeks we had a new boyfriend from that group. And then we started going to different discotheques.
Just like me.
Ondine's, when the Doors were there, and Rolling Stone,
20s,
with the Vagrants were there, and the Bittersweet.
Angano's, Harlow's.
And it was always the groups. Everything was centered around the groups.
That's the only reason I go to these places, just for the groups. I wouldn't go for the regular boys. Yeah.
Oh, when I met her, she was so sweet and
I was so sweet.
Girl.
But then they mentioned the name Group. And a boy, and guitar, and I went crazy.
Guitar.
You really corrupted me. I wasn't that bad before you. I brought her down there, and she sees all these groups, and then she started running at them, and that's all she talks about. She'd come home and tell me about this group and that group, and how cute this one was, and how cute that one was.
They are cute.
So of course I had to go see for myself, and I'd end up arguing with her about it. It's all your fault.
All your fault. The Groupies. The first recorded documentary study of the international groupie phenomenon, as reported in Rolling Stone, Time, The Realist, is that still around? Cashbox, and The Village Voice. Now, on the back, it has a few little things of transcripts from what we said on the album, and then it explains that conversation, as you may have guessed, took place between two groupies. What may surprise you is that it happened in a recording studio. The tape wound around for 12 hours, inscribing the views of 4 girls, 17 to 22. The result will be an album called The Groupies that will be released in a month and probably be a big seller. It was done by Alan Lorber, an arranger and producer who had been reading the proliferation of groupie stories in magazines like Rolling Stone and Time and thought, why not? He chose 6 girls, flying some of them in from California, and ended up using 4 in the sessions. I was one. Bringing 2 girls in at a time, he put them in separate booths facing each other, but 8 feet apart. I don't remember that. I thought we were close together. Anyway, for a lifelike stereo effect. Stereo was, new in those days. Then they just rapped. Very 60s word. And it's back. Lorber asked them to talk to each other about the things that are important to them and their lives. Here's my little photo album with all my little clippings. And I'll show you some of my clippings from when I was super groupie Cleo. Here's a little thing in a magazine about Cookie and Cleo, the super groupies on the David Susskind show. And there's Cookie and Cleo on the David Susskind show. Who knows what I was talking about when they took that picture. Here's an article called Cookie and Cleo Ride Again. They've just taped an Alan Burke show. Burke wanted to interview them at home, and recognizing that their true home had been the scene, Steve Paul opened it up for them one afternoon. They actually fared pretty well, considering Alan Burke. He decided to condemn American motherhood for allowing them to happen. Alan Lorber was nice enough to send me a transcript of the David Susskind show. Here it is. Transcript of David Susskind show. October 5th, 1969. Groupies. This is what Susskind said. This is a new phenomenon reported in Life and Time and Look and Newsweek magazine. They are adoring fans of rock and roll stars. They follow them from city to city, frequently annoying them. Not me. I never annoyed them. In any case, they exist, and you'll meet them in just 1 minute. Cut to commercial. Then later, he continues, there are superfans called the Groupies. There are no limits to the Groupies' hero worship. Of course there are. What an exaggeration. She'll go anywhere and do anything to express her admiration of her rock and roll favorite. Oh yeah? Wanna bet? I have asked 5 of these new phenomenon groupies to be with me tonight, and I would like to present them now. First, Jenny Dean, who has worked in a variety of jobs and hopes to become a singer. Jerry Miller has been a go-go dancer and is now an Andy Warhol super movie star. Jan Grinner is going to college in the fall, currently working full-time at being a groupie. Cleo Odzer just made an album called The Groupies. And Cookie Davidson is also featured on the same album. And now he gets to us. Susskind. Within the very confining limits of television, can you describe what a groupie is? You know, television in those days. Jenny, right. A groupie is any individual, male or female, who associates socially with a group. Cleo, that's me. She centers her life around groups. Didn't I make a good groupie spokesperson? Publicity for the album. Susskind. You center your life around the group? The entire group? Cleo, no, around the whole music scene. Susskind, and how do you go about centering your life around a group? Cleo, Well, you go to clubs every night, and you go to the concerts, and you just know everything that's happening music-wise. Susskind. All right, now, the concert is over, and the trio are packing their instruments. What do? Jerry, you grab the one you like, if you can get them. If you don't, you're just, looking at them. Cookie, I don't grab them. Jerry, you do anything you can do to get them to notice you, and you pick the one you like the best. And, just trying to get them. And if you get anyone you pick, you're a super groupie, like me. I've gotten anyone I wanted. Susskind, get is a loose synonym for Jerry, for television. Jenny, for having a relationship. Susskind, does it keep you busy? Getting rock and roll stars? Full-time job? Cleo, oh, it's a full-time job. Susskind, why is it a full-time job? Cleo, because there are constantly new groups coming in every day and every week, and you just have to know everything so you can gossip about them. If you miss a week, you miss a lot. Susskind, when you've gotten the singer star, you move on to the next singing star? Cookie, when that one leaves town. Jan, or if he turns out to be boring. Susskind, if he turns out to be boring. Jenny, or if you get tired of him. I recorded the album with my friend Cookie, and then we were known as Cookie and Cleo everywhere. So when people would write about groupies, of course they wrote about Cookie and Cleo and what Cookie and Cleo were up to. This was Alan Burke's show that was filmed at the scene. Everybody thought it was very fitting that they filmed this show about groupies at the scene. And there's Cookie and I and Alan Lorber. For a while, I went to live in California, and then I met all the West Coast groupies, the Plaster Casters, the GTOs, and they started to film a movie called The Groupies. And since I was there with all the others, they put us all together and took our pictures for all sorts of magazines. This is Show magazine. Here's a little interview I did for Sir magazine. A lot of naked women in there. Well, in those days, a groupie was equated with this. So we had a little interview. The Groupies, they had a picture of the album cover on there, and then they interviewed Cookie and Cleo. If only everybody did what they wanted to do, Cleo, people would be a whole lot happier. Cookie. And here's another interview with Cleo Odzer, the super groupie. Groupie Spotlight. Cleo, like many other girls her age, left home. She moved in with Cookie, and they were to be the dynamic duo of the groupie set. She was engaged to Keith Emerson, organist from the Nice, but unfortunately, Time magazine came out with the article on the groupies, and Cleo's name was mentioned. Keith stormed in and threw the magazine at her, blew his big band cool, and broke the engagement. Cleo left upset and retreated to the warmth of California. And this one, Cleo is one of the groupies who tells about her famous pastimes. And for Cashbox, I was East Coast Girl of the Week. Cleo, our East Coast Girl of the Week. Model, former pop columnist for Downtown and Hullabaloo, and one of the in crowd. Cleo can always be found in the best of places. And then when I moved to California, I was West Coast Girl of the Week. Despite the threat of earthquake, New Yorkers continued to move west. Latest import is a former East Coast Girl of the Week. Cleo, former downtown pop music columnist, has vacated New York, the scene, and Andy Warhol for a Laurel Canyon abode. Welcome west, Cleo, our West Coast Girl of the Week. And sometimes they just mentioned us. Here's a little thing. Our favorite group watchers, Cookie and Cleo, have temporarily taken up residence on the West Coast, but they faithfully continue to pass on news of interest, such as Love, an early LA rock group, and one of our favorites is being reincarnated by Arthur Lee. Who remembers these anyway? Also at the scene in those days was Tiny Tim. Remember Tiny Tim? Well, this was before he got famous. Nobody knew who Tiny Tim was except for the people who hung out on the scene, because he used to hang out in the back room, this little back room of the scene, and once or twice a night he would come out and sing with his little banjo, and everybody would just laugh hysterically. We all knew who Tiny Tim was, and we'd go back and chat with him every night, and he was this wild character, and he sent me all these trophies. And later, when he became famous, he would write about me and sing about me. And then when they wrote about Tiny Tim would mention me. Here's a little article, Why I Love to Sing by Tiny Tim. One of the girls who inspired me is a girl in New York named Miss Cleo. She is 17 with golden blonde hair and blue eyes. Whenever she is near, I feel the birds of heaven chirping in my heart as I swoon to every breath she takes while I sing each song to her. What magnetism she has. She smiles and I melt like a candy bar in the hot summer sun. Oh, Miss Cleo, oh, Miss Cleo. More magazine articles about super groupie Cleo. I talked with Cleo Odzer, a pretty blonde groupie. The business, once a hobby, lifestyle, or pastime for bored girls, is business booming. Frank Zappa is now preparing a book on the GTOs. And this was an advertisement for the Groupie album. No, that's me. They also made huge posters like this. It was purple and it was about 3 feet high, and I had a ton of them, and my mother found them and she just hated the whole groupie thing, so alas, she threw them out, and I don't have any of those anymore. Mothers. This is the article that got me in trouble, that ended our relationship. One day I was in New York and Keith was home in England, and he had to go to a studio to pick up a check. And I had been to that office once, so I had met all the catty women there that were just dying of envy. And one of them had seen this article in Time magazine. And she had him sign for his check right on top of this open page with my picture, and it saying Super Groupie Cleo, and that's when he saw that. Manners and morals, the Groupies. Songs are written for them and about them. They act as critics and even co-composers. It's all one big ego trip, gushes Super Groupie Cleo. Here in this picture is Cookie and Cleo with Peter Sabatino. Isn't he adorable? He was an old friend. I used to see him all the time. And we were just like playing with him. And that's the picture they happened to put in Time magazine about groupies worshiping of the rock. There's my picture and there's that quote, but that quote was made from another Cleo, not me. And lo and behold, he saw my picture in Time magazine, mentioned as Super Groupie Cleo. And that was the end of that relationship. And here's another clipping about Cookie and Cleo, the Groupies. There's a good possibility that Cleo, at least, will do both Dick Cavett and Johnny Carson. Cookie's considering retiring and is having grave doubts about whether it's all worth it. We inquired discreetly about the possibility of Cleo posing for Kiss. The answer came back something like, What kind of a girl do you think I am? And here's another clipping about Cookie and Cleo, the groupies. Cookie, according to my inside information, is the #2 groupie in New York, right behind best friend Cleo, featured in the first issue of Rock. It was her friendship with Cleo that led Cookie into the groupie spotlight. Here's another article from Cashbox about super groupies, Cookie and Cleo. You might have seen Cookie's back in the recent Time story on Groupies, standing with Cleo, a recent East Coast Girl of the Week. And another article about Cleo, the super groupie. And at the time, somebody wrote a book about groupies, and they needed a picture to go with the book, so they used Cleo, the super groupie. Here is just a clipping from a party I had. A party for Cleo, the super groupie. And on Thursday night, Cheetah presents the dedication of a new light machine named for Cleo, Queen of the Super Groupies. She'll be there along with all the other groupies for a special evening at the Cheetah, the Groupies Ball. This is a little article that was also in the Downtown, and it says, Downtown's own pop columnist Cleo got the first miniskirt. In those days, weird clothes were in, so that's when we all started invading these antique shops and bought weird costumes, and they were costumes to some people. To me, they were just clothes. Here I am mentioned, this was also in Downtown newspaper, and this was a column by Andy Warhol. He had a column in Downtown, and I had a column in Downtown. Underground Confidential Worldwide Exclusive by Andy Warhol. Also in the audience at the scene were the following: names, Liberace, Frank Zappa, who went to the John twice, and Cleo.